Hello everybody, I'm SocietySucks and welcome back to another video. Today I'm checking out why didn't the US nuke Tokyo by history matters. My assumption would be that the US didn't nuke Tokyo because there were too many people in it. I'm not sure how many people were in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but it was definitely a lot less than Tokyo. But that's just what I think. Maybe the real reason is different. Let's find out.
World War II came to a sudden end on August the 15th when Japan announced its unconditional surrender to New Zealand and probably the rest of the Allies alongside it. This came about shortly after the US deployed 2 atomic bombs against Japan, the first in Hiroshima on the 6th and the second at Nagasaki on the 9th. Both of these cities were fairly middling in terms of population and
Hiroshima was number 9 and Nagasaki is not even in the top 10. Yeah, so I'll assume that the population at least played a part in why they didn't go for Tokyo.
Output, and their destruction had Japan not surrendered would have done little to impact the war effort. But given that Tokyo, Osaka and Kyoto were far greater cities, why weren't they chosen as the targets? Why didn't the United States drop the atomic bomb on the most important city of Tokyo? So to begin, President Truman had authorized the use of the bomb in order to force Japan's surrender. The hope being that by showing the incredible power of the new atomic weapons, the US wouldn't have to launch a ground invasion of the Japanese mainland. The belief being that US casualties in such a situation would number in the hundreds of thousands.
Oh, they would be massive.
Interestingly, because of the 1943 Quebec Agreement, in order to use atomic weapons, Truman needed the agreement of both Britain and Canada, represented by Britain, who enthusiastically said yes. The Americans came up with a short list of places to drop the bomb. The first potential target was obviously Tokyo. But this was quickly dismissed for several reasons.
The biggest
first
city.
was that given the objective was to force a Japanese surrender, dropping the bomb on Japanese leadership and potentially vaporizing them meant that there wouldn't be anyone left with the authority to surrender. Furthermore, by destroying the center of the Japanese government, administering Japan after the war would be nigh on impossible for the Allies without considerable rebuilding, and so it was easier just to bomb somewhere else. There was also the obvious problem of the emperor. The Japanese had made it clear that he had to stay no matter what. And if, say, he and his family were turned into shadows, that would likely entrench Japanese hatred and make them fight harder. Furthermore,
yeah, I suppose
Tokyo
that's
had already
true.
been bombed and
if your enemy just killed your leadership, you would probably be motivated to fight harder, just to, I don't know, enact some petty revenge for a leadership that doesn't give a damn about its soldiers, its people. Yeah, so what I said about the population, I guess that just didn't matter at all. That wasn't even considered, which I suppose makes sense because I'm pretty sure that firebombing campaigns in Japan killed more people than both atomic bombs combined. So yeah, I don't think killing more people was really a main concern of theirs. They just didn't want to get rid of the leadership so that they would have an easier time with Japan after the war ends.
So dropping a nuke on an already bombed out city wouldn't make the point nearly as clearly. The next potential target was Kyoto. This was Japan's former capital, an important historical and cultural centre, as well as having a large population. The belief being that by getting rid of it, the Japanese people and government would be forced to come to terms. This was actually the preferred target of both the US military and President Truman, and it was only when his Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, demanded that it be taken off the list that it was. He did this because he was concerned that by destroying such a valuable city, the Americans would never be forgiven, and that the Japanese would
I assume there's a lot of cultural significance there because I often hear about Kyoto. Having such a city destroyed would definitely not be something they would forgive. Due to the cultural significance, Kyoto is probably even more important than Tokyo itself. At least it was then, I'm not sure about today.
Likely turned to the Soviets for vengeance. He'd also personally been there, and so he just liked the place. And with that, the only other targets were Hiroshima, Yokohama, Kokura and Niigata. The two chosen were Hiroshima because of its major military base and Kokura because of its weapons factories. These two had barely been touched by American bombers, and so it would be obvious that all of the destruction came from one bomb. As you'll likely be aware, Kokura isn't famous for being the second city to be nuked. This was because the smoke from Kokura's factories combined with cloud cover meant that it wasn't possible to see the target effectively. And so instead, they had to bomb their backup target, Nagasaki. As you'll know, the Japanese soon...
Imagine how that must have been for the people of Nagasaki. They were never even meant to be bombed. They were just a backup target in case they couldn't bomb Kuroko, whatever the main target was called.
Surrendered, and so after this there was no reason to use another bomb, and so Tokyo was spared. I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks.
So the reason they didn't nuke Tokyo was because the leadership was there. Although it was a target, and had Japan not surrendered after the first 2 atomic bombs, Tokyo might have actually been bombed, eventually. I assume Tokyo would have been the very last city to be targeted. Although no, maybe the second last. I think the last target to be considered would have been Kyoto. And yeah, the high population, which would have resulted in a high number of casualties, definitely wasn't a concern to the Americans, because the conventional bombings on Japan killed more people than both nukes combined. So yeah, casualties were definitely not a concern for them. But yeah, it is what it is. Tokyo got lucky. Although, actually no, can I really say Tokyo got lucky? No. The firebombing campaign in Tokyo killed tons of people, so... Well, at least they got lucky enough not to be nuked. So that's something. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you're interested, why not check out this video right here? And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.